So I will forever remember the words that changed the course of my life. At the time, I was 19 years old, I was bored, I was depressed, and I didn't know what I was doing with my life. And on a whim, I decided I was going to hike up Pikes Peak, this amazingly beautiful mountain I'd been staring at for over a decade. So I borrowed a lot of my dad's old gear from the 70s, and I rented a backpack from Mountain Chalet. And after working a long night shift at a grocery store, I decided I was going to start my hike up. So my pack was way overburdened with way too much stuff, and it was very hot out. And I trudged about a mile up the trail with streams of hikers and runners passing me up and down as I slowly went up step by step. And after a mile, going up the trail, I was exhausted and I was ready to turn around and I just wanted to go home. And as I did, this man with a walking stick coming down came and he stopped to talk with me. And after I told him that I was going to go up to bar camp, spend the night, and go up to the summit house, he said something quite shocking to me. And that was, "You inspire me." And it was, I inspired him? I was just a 19-year-old kid. I didn't know what I was doing. And I had been so antisocial and afraid to interact with anybody for a long time that I'd removed myself from the social sphere. So here I was, just when I was ready to give up and turn around, I suddenly found the inspiration to continue, and it was from this stranger who I inspired. And in that moment I realized I couldn't turn around, I couldn't go home, because that would be letting this man down, this man that I inspired. So I picked up my heavy pack and I continued on. It was another 5 miles up to bar camp, and it was probably the most grueling experience of my life up to that point. And I slept for 14 hours that night and got up in the morning, and I had some of the caretaker Neil's famous Pikes Peak Power Pancakes, which inspired me to continue on the way up. And so I met 2 other hikers and we continued our way up. And all throughout the morning I kept catching glimpses out through the trees and I could see a little bit of the view perched below. So about 3 miles past bar camp, about 9 miles up bar trail, there's a little A-frame emergency shelter. And so we stopped there for a break, and I was completely exhausted. So I set down my pack, and I looked out, and I saw the view, and in that moment, my mind was silent, and I was filled with awe and wonder, just at looking at the profundity of this simple view. In Colorado Springs, which I had perceived as very large growing up, was suddenly small in this just plains that stretched far out into the distance. And in that moment, I didn't know it then, but something profound and amazing was awakened within me. And it was that silence in my mind. So the rest of the trail up to the summit was covered in about 4 feet of snow, but we managed to post-hole our way up and get to the summit. And that summer, I started chasing something, and I would get up before dawn every morning and go hike another 14er, or mountain above 14,000 feet. And looking back, it was very clear I was chasing something, but at the time I wouldn't have said so. But I was chasing that silent mind, that experience at the A-frame. And I would find it sometimes perched on a dangerous ridge, or watching the sun rise over a distant valley, or looking out at the many mountains from a summit. And as I continued to hike, I would be just shocked into this inner silence, this inner space of infinity inside myself. But as I continued to again and again, that space eluded me as the views became routine. So after a while, it faded out and I kind of stopped hiking. And then a few months later, when I was 20 years old, I quit a well-paying job to join a traveling carnival, where I was basically a carny, or carnival worker. And carnies have their own brand of cliches, and we kind of fulfilled our own cliches. It was staffed by a lot of young potheads and burnouts, and somehow the work managed to get done every weekend, safely enough. And at that time, I was 20 years old, and I had lived a very sheltered life. So I hadn't really drank or smoked anything, just a very kind of sheltered kid. And that all changed on a 3-week trip when we went up through Wyoming and Montana. And every night, we kind of fulfilled our role as carnies, and we drank and we smoked. And when we were doing that, I discovered something. And that was, one, that I really liked drinking, but that when I got intoxicated enough, that I would find a little space that was somewhat similar to that space on the A-frame. It was an inner place where I could find some respite, except this was kind of a bastardized, drug-filled version. But it was easy. I could find it very easy at the bottom of a bottle. And so that's what I did for pretty much the next 18 months. After the carnival, I went and worked the lifts at Vail at the ski resort, and then I found myself in Alaska, managing a food warehouse. And so when I'm telling my story about this to other people, I just pass it off as very adventuresome and exciting and grand, which it really was. But I leave out the truer, darker parts, which was that it was filled with a lot of alienation, self-hatred, and just a lot of drinking. And So after that, I was 22 years old, and I kind of randomly ended up on the big island of Hawaii. And there I found the most perfect exterior conditions of my life. I had a nice cottage in the jungle, I had plenty of money, and I had time to go explore the island. And it was great. It was everything I was looking forward to. My life was literally perfect, and it was everything I knew it would be. And that lasted for 3 days. And then the thought, what's next, arose. And in that single moment, my entire perception of reality and the way that I knew the world worked was shattered. And I was disorientated, because I saw then that if these perfect conditions weren't going to fulfill my needs, that for me, nothing in this material conditioned realm ever would. So I began looking. I started reading a lot of spiritual books from all different faiths, was a very open mind. I participated in Hare Krishna kirtans, chanting and dancing. I did some ayahuasca ceremonies where you consume a hallucinogenic brew and chant songs in Portuguese from sunrise to sunset. And most important, I began to meditate. I would ride my bike out to the coast on the rocky shore as the waves crashed in, and I would follow my breath, just some simple instructions from a basic Buddhism book. And so I continued to do these things. I would backpack around the island with friends, have adventures, and I continued to meditate very sporadically. And then one day, after maybe a month or two, I noticed something. There was a gap, just a tiny little space between thoughts. And I knew it then that that's what I was looking for, that it was this profound moment that I've kind of found this thing, this undescribable something that I've been looking for. And it was very comparable to my moment on the A-frame, that there was this space between thoughts, where normally my mind would just think. And after maybe a week, I noticed this space held a lot of potential, and it held the potential for choice and a lot of free will. So instead of getting agitated or angry when somebody cut me off or drove too close or the bus was late, I could choose how I would react. I could choose to be calm or choose to be angry or choose not to react at all. But I know I'd found something very special. So my practice was invigorated, and I started to practice a lot more for longer periods of time and more frequently. And after a year on the big island of Hawaii, I moved back to Colorado Springs, where I joined a local meditation group and did a 2-day silent meditation retreat that really opened me up to just how deep I could go with it. And then I truly knew that meditation was it for me. So since then, it's been 3.5 years, and I've done 160 days of silent meditation retreats, ranging from 3 days to 6 weeks. And at this point, I can cultivate that gap in my mind. I can find peace and contentment with my meditation practice, with my search for meaning, and with my life. And I'd really love to end the story there, just kind of a nice Hollywood fade to black where the characters are all happy and live perfectly forever and ever. But that's not really the truth, although it's a story I tend to tell people and a lot of the times believe myself. So while I can find peace in my meditation practice, I still find that space in alcohol or marijuana or another intoxicants easier to find. And I've never been able to do both at once. I can't find that space in meditation and find it in the intoxicants at the same time. So I'm very one or the other, and I've been oscillating back and forth. And then last year, in one of my comparative religions classes, I was very surprised to find a quote from a book called The Varieties of Religious Experience by William James. And in it, William James calls it the divided self, and he writes that there are some individuals whose lives are little more than a series of zigzags, that their spirit wars with their flesh, and they wish for incompatibles. And it was like James could see right through me, and this was written over 100 years ago. And it was just amazing that he could just describe that aspect of my character so correctly. And so that's where I'm at. I'm very much a divided self, oscillating back and forth. But one day, hopefully, this suffering can give me the foundation to help others, to help them avoid the pitfalls that I have fallen through again and again. So, thank you.